Hello, welcome to this lesson. In this schedule, we're going to do biology, which is fifth ninth. We're going to do a topic called ecology. Okay, we'll do ecology. For better understanding of this topic, we must understand the root of ecology. What does ecology mean? Okay, so in biology, there are certain terms whereby they are made by certain prefixes and suffixes. Okay, you can only understand them better if you are able to break that term in parts. Okay, so for example, let's look at the way biology is. Bio means life. This logy means study. Okay, so let's now apply this concept to understand also ecology. Eco, something eco, okay, something which is in eco existence, meaning that it is depending on each other, it is in a certain relationship. Okay, and also lodge from biology, we've said it means study. Now let's understand what ecology is. So when you're talking about ecology, ecology is just the branch of biology that deals with the relationship between living organisms and their environment. So what are we saying? Relationship between living organisms, okay, and their environment. Basically, that is what ecology is. Let's look at some terms or ecological terminologies which you must appreciate. The first term you must understand is the term itself, ecology. You must understand ecology. Then the second term which you must look at is known as ecosystem. Okay? Ecosystem. What is an ecosystem? So an ecosystem is just a defined area. Okay, it is just a defined area in which living organisms. So we are saying defined area defined area in which living organisms can interact. Okay, it's a defined area in which living organisms interact. Okay, that is an ecosystem. So they interact and they can reproduce. Okay, that is what an ecosystem is all about. A defined area in which living organisms can interact and can reproduce. Okay, that is basically what an ecosystem is. So we have different types of ecosystem. We have what is known as, okay, even before we can look at that, let's look at another term, or let's look at the same types. Okay, types of ecosystem. So one, we have what is known as aquatic ecosystem. So aquatic ecosystem, this is an ecosystem related to water. Aquatic, aqua means water. Then we have also what is known as a terrestrial ecosystem. So when you're talking about a terrestrial ecosystem, this is an ecosystem related to what? Land. That is what a terrestrial ecosystem is. Then let's look at another term. we have what are known as biotic factors, biotic factors and abiotic factors. So what are biotic? So we have biotic and we also have abiotic factors. So what are biotic factors? Let's start with biotic factors. Okay, so when you're looking at biotic factors are just the living factors of the environment. The living factors of the environment. This includes plants, okay, and animals also. We can say even humans, but humans fall under animals, okay? Then we have what are known as abiotic factors. What are abiotic factors? So these are non-living part of the environment. For example, you can say air, stones, land, water, sand. Those are abiotic. They are non-living part of the environment. Let's look at the third term, which we are calling niche. Some pronounce it as niche. Okay, you can pronounce it whichever way you want to pronounce it, but you just need to know the spelling. Okay, we shall meet in spellings. So that is niche. So what is niche? So when you're talking about niche, this is just a role played, a specific role played by a certain organism in an ecosystem. Okay, for example, when you look at plants are able to carry out photosynthesis, and during the process of photosynthesis, plants are able to what to expire what is known as oxygen. Okay, plants are able to give out oxygen. Okay, then this oxygen is now able to be used by animals. Okay, but in return, these animals are able to give out carbon dioxide. They expire carbon dioxide, and this again, carbon dioxide is used by plants to carry out what photosynthesis. What is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is just a process. Let's define photosynthesis. It is just a process by which a green plant is able to manufacture its own food by using what? Carbon dioxide and water in the presence of what? In the presence of chlorophyll and sunlight. Okay, so that is what photosynthesis is all about. Photo means light, synthesis means to make. So that is what photosynthesis is. So we have talked about niche as a specific role played by a certain organism in an ecosystem. Now let's look at the fourth term. The fourth term we'll look at is known as a community. Community. What is a community? So a community is just a group of organisms. Okay, a group of organisms which live together, or a population of organisms which live together and are able to interact. Okay, for example, when you're talking about a community of people, there are people who live together and are able to associate or interact. Okay, so it's a population of organisms that live together and are able to do what? To interact. So that is a community. Now let's look at another term we are calling term 5. Let's look at what is known as habitat. It is not habitant, it is habitat. What is habitat? Habitat is just a place where organisms live. Okay, habitat is just a place where organisms live. Now let's look at some examples of habitat. For example, we can say some organisms live on trees rather. Okay, for example, birds. Some organisms live on land. For example, humans. Some organisms live in water. For example, fish, crocodile. Some organisms live in air. For example, bacteria. Okay, some insects. Okay, so there are different things. There are different habitats where organisms live. Okay, let's look at the sixth term. The sixth term we are calling population. know what is population. When you're talking about population is just a group of organisms living in a defined or in a certain area at that particular time. Okay, so a population, the keywords there, it should be living in the same area, and they should be of the same species. Okay, and at the same time. So you can define it any way you want it, but these keywords must not miss in your definition. So a population rather, it's a group of organisms which live in the same area at that particular time and of the same species. The total number of organisms, okay? The total number of organisms living in a certain area, in the same area, at the same time, and in of the same species. That is a population. So when you're talking about a population of people, when you're doing census, okay, they count the population. They count the population of people. So they can't mix to say we are going to count the population like they mix people and also some other animals, no, or some other things. So population, it should be of the same species. When you're talking about population of animals, it should be just animals. When you're talking about population of humans, it should be the population of what? Of humans. When you're talking about population of birds, you must count the total number of birds and not other things. So that is what population is. Now let's look at what is known as a species. Okay, so what is a species? So when you're talking about a species is just a certain or a group of organisms that are able to reproduce. Okay, organisms that are able to what to reproduce young ones. That are what are known as species. Okay, group of organisms that are able to reproduce. Now let's look at another thing. Another thing we will look at is known as a food chain and a food web. So what is a food chain and what is a food web? Let's start with a food chain. So what is a food chain? So a food chain is just a sequence of organisms, okay, in which energy flows. It is just a sequence of organisms in which energy flows. Okay, I can give an example. For example, we have grass here. Grass. So this arrow is pointing on an organism that feeds on grass. Okay, that's how it is. Grass, an organism which feeds on grass is, for example, a cow. A cow can be fed by, let's say, which organism can we put here? So we can say maybe by man. Okay, then man can be fed by a lion. So this is a food chain. Okay, it's a sequence of organisms. You can see that there's a sequence of organisms and energy is flowing. Okay, we'll look at how energy is flowing there. Then let's look at a food web. What is a food web? So a food web is just an interconnection or interlinked food chain. So it is interconnected food chain or interlinked. Those are the keywords which must be in your definition. Interlinked or interconnected. That is what a food web is. For example, you can have, let's say, you can have cow here, you can have man here, you can have grass here. What can we have? We can have maybe let's say we can have maybe lion there. Okay, we know that cow can be fed by man, and also man can be fed by a lion. Okay, lion can feed on man, then cow can feed on grass. So the arrow points on an organism which feeds on the other. Okay, maybe we can have even a goat here. Man can feed on a goat. This goat can feed on the grass. Lion can feed on a goat, like that. And also this lion can feed on the what? On the cow, and man can feed on the grass, okay? On this special kind of grass, not just any grass. Maybe we can say vegetation, okay? Vegetation, like some grasses, like rape, those vegetables, okay? So this is what we are talking about. Oh, I should have specified, maybe I should have put cabbage there. So this is cabbage we are talking about, not just any grass. So this, you can see that there is some interconnection. So these interconnections is what is forming a web, okay? I'm sure you've seen before a spider web. So those webs, there are some interconnections. So this is what a food web is all about. Now let's look at the differences. Let's look at the differences between a food chain and a food web. So one difference is that in a food chain is just linear, okay? But a food chain is linear, but a food web is what? Interconnected or interlinked, okay? That is one difference. Another difference is that in a food chain, an organism can feed on just one organism. It is one to one. But in a food web, an organism can be fed by many organisms, maybe one to many, or many organisms feeding on one organism, or many to one, okay? That is in a food web kind of a sequence. So basically you need to understand that. And also the other thing you need to understand is that in a food chain food chain is just a simple structure. A food chain is simple, but when you're talking about a food web is complex, okay? A food web is very complex, but a food chain is simple. So you need to understand also that. Now let's look at what is known as pyramids. What is a pyramid? So when you're talking about a pyramid is just a diagrammatical representation of a feeding relation in an ecosystem, okay? A diagrammatical or a diagrammatic representation of a feeding relation in an ecosystem. So a pyramid is made up of what is known as trophic levels, okay? You must understand what are known as trophic levels. What are trophic levels? So a trophic level is just a feeding level in an ecosystem, okay? A feeding level in an ecosystem. That is what is known as a trophic level. Now let's look at the types of pyramids. So when you're looking at types of pyramid, there are three types. There's what is known as number pyramid or a pyramid of numbers, okay? There's what is known as energy pyramid or a pyramid of energy. Then the third one is what is known as a biomass. This is number 3, biomass pyramid, okay? The third one is biomass pyramid. So let's understand something here. What is a pyramid of numbers? Let's start with numbers, okay? Or number pyramid. So one thing you need to understand here is that when you're talking about number pyramid, a number pyramid, it is just a pyramid which shows the total number of organisms at each trophic level, okay? This one shows number of organisms. Number of organisms at each trophic level. For example, we can have this, okay? Let's say here there are 50 organisms, then here let's say there are 100 organisms. Then here, let's say, so these are trophic levels. There's 120 organisms. Then here, let's say there's just maybe, let's say, 5 organisms. Okay, so this is a pyramid of numbers, or a number pyramid. So one thing you need to understand here is that a pyramid of numbers can also be inverted, whereby it is written upside down. Okay, it can be inverted, whereby we start with like a 5 there, 5 organisms there, then we come to this 120 organisms, then we come to this 100 organisms, then we come to this 50 organisms. So this is an inverted, okay, inverted, which means written upside down. Let's look at another type of pyramid, which we are calling biomass pyramid. Biomass pyramid. So what is biomass? Biomass is just the total dry mass, okay? Total dry mass of an organism. The total dry mass of an organism is what is known as biomass. So a pyramid of biomass is just a pyramid which shows the total dry mass of an organism at each trophic level. Let's have an example. Let's say biomass, we are talking about mass, right? So it is measured in what? In kilograms. So let's have an example. We can have, let's say, this is a pyramid of biomass. There we have 200 kg. Then there maybe we have let's say 400 kg. Okay, then there, let's say we have 300 kg. Then there, let's say we have 100 kg. So this is a pyramid of biomass. Okay, we need to know that a pyramid of biomass can also be inverted. So it can start like this, it can be like this, whereby you begin with the 100 kg there, then we come to the 300 kg there, then we come to the one which has 400 kg there, then we come to the one which has a 200 kg. So this is an inverted. So a pyramid of biomass can also be what? Inverted. Now, you can be asked also about energy pyramid. Energy pyramid, or a pyramid of energy. So what is a pyramid of energy? So a pyramid of energy is a pyramid which shows, or a diagram which shows the total amount of energy at each trophic level. Okay, so we can have, so this one is showing total energy at each trophic level, at each trophic level. So let's have an example. We can have, let's say we can start maybe with maybe 1000 joules, or 1000, maybe let's say 100,000 joules. Okay, then it is decreasing, the energy is decreasing, let's say to 50, maybe 500 joules here, then it decreases to maybe 1000 joules, then it decreases maybe to 100 joules. Okay, so this is what is known as a pyramid of what? Energy. So one thing about the pyramid of energy is that it can't be inverted. Okay, you can't start with a pyramid. We can't start with a trophic level which has the first or the smallest amount. So this is the first trophic level. Okay, in fact it was supposed to be the other way around. Let me draw it like this, because it can't be inverted. Okay, it can't be written upside down. So let me start with this. This is 100,000 joules. Then it comes to maybe 50,000 joules. Okay. Then it comes to maybe, let's say, 1,000 joules. Then it comes to maybe 1,100 joules. Okay. Then this is the first trophic level, that is the second, that is the third, and that is the fourth. So a pyramid of energy, this one cannot be inverted. It cannot be inverted. You can't write it upside down. So you can't start with the smallest energy, then you come to a big energy. No. The biggest energy is always at the first trophic level. Okay? So what you need to understand here is that energy decreases. Okay? It decreases at each and every trophic level. So if you have, let's say, grass here, then we have maybe, let's say, grasshopper here. Then we have what is on grasshopper. So we can have maybe man here. Man, then lion here. Okay? So one thing you need to understand is that at each and every trophic level, 90% of the energy is lost. Okay? And only 10% of it is transferred to the next trophic level. So even here, 90% lost. Even here, 90% is lost, but only 10% transferred. Even there, just 10% is transferred. So even there, just 10% of the energy is transferred. Okay? So you need to understand this. So sometimes they may ask you that maybe at the first trophic level here, there was 50, or maybe there was 5,000 joules. Okay? So let's say at the first trophic level there is 5,000 joules. Then they ask you, this is the first trophic level, they ask you maybe to calculate the energy at this trophic level. Let's say this is the second, at the second trophic level, and also at the third trophic level. So how can you calculate this? So we know that energy is decreasing by 90% is lost, and only 10% is transferred. So you need to calculate what is 10%. 10%, 10 out of 100 multiplied by 10% multiplied by the 5,000 of energy we have there. So this will give you, this is just 500 joules here. Then again, you calculate the energy at the third trophic level. You say 500 multiplied by 10 over 100. So you cancel out that, you find that there's just 50 joules there. So only 10% of the energy is transferred. Okay? So one thing you need to understand here, they'll ask you that why is it that most of the trophic levels end at trophic level number 4? The answer is, it is because as the energy reaches on the fourth trophic level, it is too small to support another trophic level. Okay? Just like in our previous example, the energy at the third was 50 joules. So if we calculate again 10% of this 50, we'll find that it is just 5 joules. So 5 joules is too small to support another trophic level, which will be the next one. So most of the trophic levels are able to end on trophic level number 4, because as the energy reaches on trophic number 4, it is too small to support another organism. Okay, so that is what you need to understand there. And you need to understand also some groups or categories of organisms. So we have what are known as producers. Okay, so producers are always plants. What produces energy? It is plants. Plants produce energy by what? By chemical means, through photosynthesis. From what? Sunlight. So light energy is converted into chemical energy. Okay, light energy is converted, or solar energy is converted into chemical energy by plants using the chloroplast. Okay, they are the ones which converts light energy into chemical energy during the process of what? During the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so you need to understand that. Then the other thing you must understand here is that we have also what are called decomposers. What are decomposers? So decomposers are organisms that are able to destroy, or organisms that are able to break down some decaying matters. Okay, organisms that are able to break down decaying matters, those are what are known as decomposers. And decomposers are usually bacteria. Okay, bacteria are able to decompose or to break down a dead decaying matter and retain nutrients into the soil. Then we also have what are known as herbivores. We have what are known as herbivores. Herbivores or herbivorous animals. So what are herbivorous animals? Herbivorous animals are animals that feed on predominantly what? Plants. They just feed on vegetation. For example, cow, okay, goat. Those are herbivorous what? Animals or herbivores. We also have what are known as carnivorous. We have what are known as carnivorous or carnivores. So carnivorous animals are animals that are predominantly feeding on what? Fresh. Those animals which feed on flesh, which feed predominantly on flesh. They only feed on flesh. Those are carnivorous. For example, we can talk of lion. Lion is a carnivorous what? Animal. Crocodile. Crocodile is just able to feed on other animals. So they are carnivorous animals. Okay? Then we also have what is known as